We're beginning by having a conversation with former Senator Rick Santorum, who needs no introduction. Rick, thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime I have a chance to spend time with Kayla, it's a done deal. I'll do it.
Well, likewise with you. There's so much I'd love to talk to you about, and this is high on the list. Talking about paid family leave. For starters, how did you come to make this a priority? Because a lot of people obviously don't necessarily associate conservatives with paid family leave, including conservatives.
Yeah, well, I mean, let me give you a little history. I mean, when I was in the House of Representatives during the Clinton administration, the Family Medical Leave Act was on the floor, and obviously it passed. But I voted against it because I saw that as an unfunded mandate, if you will, on the business community, and felt that there were better ways to approach it, more conservative ways to approach it. Now here I am, 20 years later, and supporting paid family leave. You say, well, how do you get there? How do you go from opposing it? I don't think I have the reputation of being a politician that evolves. And so, how did this evolution take place? Yeah, yeah. As one person said, one of the great minds of the 13th century. I mean, that's what I get called. So I'm not necessarily known.
It's a good century, Senator.
The reason is because the way we approach the issue. Well, two things. Number one, the way we approach the issue. Number two, what's happened to society. I mean, we're now looking at record low birth rates. We're looking at record lack of family formation. We're in a whole different situation than we were many years ago. But more importantly, it's the solution that I'm advocating. We're going to talk about today is a conservative solution. So it's not that I was against. I mean, heck, I wrote a book 15 years ago called "It Takes a Family." We need to do more to strengthen and support and nurture families, but it doesn't mean intrusive government programs, things that harm the economy and could ultimately hurt families. It's things that we can do to nurture families consistent with values that will keep our economy strong and not have the government be intruding in disrupting the family. So as you'll see in our discussions, these are voluntary programs. These are programs that are using existing resources that people are going to receive in government benefits, and it's the timing of those benefits in order to give people choices to help support them and their families at this critical time of the birth of a child or adoption of a child. So it's not new money. It's not new taxes. It's flexibility with existing programs, and it's using them in ways that can better help families deal with these problems. That's number one. Number two, and I'm known for my long-winded answers, so I will just I'm going to confess right up here front. But the second thing is, I have been involved in conservative policies, public policy development for almost 30 years now, and one of the most consistent themes that I have seen among conservatives is we see a national issue on the rise. Healthcare is a perfect example of this, that you have seen the persistent drumbeat that we just can't, we can't allow for a large number of people to be uninsured. We can't have, people with pre-existing conditions not having access to insurance. These were issues that have been around for 30 years, and Republicans' approach was, let the market solve it, let the market solve it. And the market wasn't solving it. You can say, well, government had a role in that, whatever it is. The bottom line is the market wasn't solving it. And some of us were putting forth proposals to try to deal with this issue, but we kept getting pushback from our more conservative brethren that, this is just big government conservatism. Here's the problem. If we don't solve the problem with innovative approaches that maintain the market system and respect families and respect individuals, then the left is going to move forward and they're going to do it. And eventually the steam will come out of the kettle and you get Obamacare. Instead of something that would actually have worked at a fraction of the cost had we instituted conservative policies that many of our conservative brethren said, no, don't do anything, let the market work. So I think this is another situation where the left has a big government solution, lots of money, very intrusive, I think, and potentially destructive of, further destructive of family cohesion and unity. And we need to come up with something before that becomes law. And then we're do what we do with Obamacare. Okay, we'll spend that much money now, which is 10 times what we would have spent if we had solved it in the first place. We'll spend that much money now and we'll try to make it more conservative. Let's not just keep responding to bad policy proposals that get passed by the Democrats and trying to fix them. Let's try to do something at a fraction of the cost that actually works the first time.
So what do you find? I know you've been working with people on the Democratic side on this. What are the common grounds where you can really come together, and what are the deal killers for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of taken the position. I think most Republicans have taken the position who support, paid family leave, which is the generic term. More specifically, paid paternal leave. So it's there. When you talk about paid family leave, you're talking about potentially, caregiver leave, sick leave, in addition to paternity leave. I mean, there are all sorts of quote leave options in the Family Act, which is the Democrats' proposal, that has 3 or 4 programs to take care of different types of leave that you might want to take. What I think Republicans have a consensus. Those Republicans that support this, I should say, who have consensus, is really focused on the issue of paternity leave, and for a lot of reasons. But I think the most important is it's the most consequential that has the least other options to take care of the problem. I mean, sick leave is sort of, there are lots of sick leave. Most businesses have PT. I mean, personal time or sick leave. There are all sorts of, obviously workers' compensation. There's all sorts of ways to take care of someone who's injured or someone who's sick, but there isn't really, a widely popular or widely used program for paternity leave that's paid. Lots of businesses, of course, because of family medical leave, give people time off work, but it's not paid. In fact, the people who need it the most, who are lower and middle income, almost have no access to paid leave because they don't get it through their employment, where that's not the case with sick leave. It's not the case with other types of leave. So that's number one. Number two is the consequence of that leave, I think, is much more profound than anything else, because the most consequential time in the life of a child is the first few months of that child's life. And there's now all sorts of research that shows that if a child is not properly bonded with the mom or a dad, that child has profound consequences throughout the course of their life, and that's going to impact their ability to be successful economically, educationally, culturally, socially, psychologically. I mean, there are just so much evidence now that supports that bonding and that feeling of safety and security and stability for that little brain that's getting wired as that if we don't provide that time, that respite for mom or dad, or hopefully mom and dad, to develop those connections, that the consequence for society is profound, much more so that, look, taking care of an elderly parent's important, but it doesn't have profound societal consequences for the future of the country. This does. And I think that's one of the most important things. And then finally, the consequences for mom and dad. We see over half of the children raised in America today are not going to have a father in the home. 75% of children in poor neighborhoods are born out of wedlock. Having that paternity leave available so fathers bond with their children. Moms naturally bond with children because they're carrying them for 9 months. Dads don't. Dads need to see and hold and touch that baby to feel that connection. And that connection, during this time can be very, very important, as how much dad will stay around and be involved in a positive way in that child's life. So there's just so many deeper consequences to this leave than these other leaves, that we need to focus the scarce resources and the effort on this particular area.
And what you're talking about too, besides being conservative, isn't it absolutely essential for pro-lifers to be talking about this seriously? Because frankly, what we sometimes refer to as the, slander against pro-lifers, if we're not talking about how to help those families after that child is born, the left has something on us here.
And look, one of the most legitimate things that I heard the left say when it came to the issue of abortion, and maybe I should say the only legitimate thing that I heard the left say when it came to the issue of abortion was, all you care about is the baby being born. And you don't do anything to help afterwards. And now, that's not true anything, but the reality is we certainly did not step up to the plate as pro-lifers. My daughter, Sarah Maria, who you know very well, Kayla, just went to work for a crisis pregnancy center. I couldn't be more proud of her in the work that she's doing. And to me, that's ground zero in to push back against the left who says we don't do anything. In fact, there are hundreds and hundreds of centers now across America who are doing lots of things to support women in a situation with a difficult situation with an unexpected pregnancy. So that's number one, but there's more that we need to do. And this, again, going back to a book I wrote in 2005, It Takes a Family. One of the things I've said that Republicans don't do, particularly many of our more libertarianish conservatives, is we tend to focus just on economics, and we don't focus on another vitally important part of capital formation in America, which is human capital. And we tend to focus on everything is dollars and cents and growth and what are our taxes, what are the regulations, and not focusing on the most important small business in America, which is the family. We as conservatives always talk, how important small businesses. We got to do something to help small businesses. Well, how about helping the small business of the family and making sure that business can be economically viable, and that we provide real options for healthy marriages and healthy child rearing that is going to build the next generation of Americans who are going to elect the presidents and build the economy and educate the future. Those things are, unfortunately, among many conservatives, are not placed and are not as highly valued. And I think one of the things that I'm excited about and have decided to take a bigger role in this is to try to draw attention to this sort of whole area of family policy and what we can do to strengthen our country. Because look at this next generation. I mean, you have most of them not believing in God, believing socialism is better than capitalism. We haven't done a very good job in that part of the pro-life movement of nurturing the next generation so we can have a future in America.
When you've been talking about this for a few years now, in a big way, what is the most common objection you get from conservatives, or have you been encouraged by some of the receptivity people have to it?
Yeah, I think that the groups that are most pliable when it comes to this issue, that will be willing to listen and actually come along, are folks who are in the pro-life community, who are in the pro-family community, because the argument that I was making truly resonates with them, and they recognize the value and importance of family and the value and importance of parents being engaged and involved with the raising and nurturing of their children. So I think pretty overwhelmingly that group, while initially skeptical because the idea of government being involved in raising and nurturing your children, when they see that it's voluntary, when they see that it's an existing program, that's no new taxes, and that we're really just talking about how families can take the benefits that the government is providing them already and shape it in a way that best meets the needs of their family, they don't have a whole lot of objections to it. But then you have a lot of folks, again, that are not on the social conservative spectrum, who see this as quote, government, more government interference, more government involvement in issues that should be left alone. The problem is, and the argument I try to make to those people is, the government isn't neutral right now. I mean, the government is doing a lot of things that undermine the ability or the incentives for fathers and mothers to stay together and nurture and raise children, that we're not providing the support that we would provide to a small business, with all sorts of tax incentives to stabilize and give them a good head start in their business. So when there's going to be, quote, losses, we have all sorts of provisions that help steer investment to private businesses and give them tax breaks but we don't really focus so much on the family side. And again, I would say that the biggest argument is, we don't want government involved in this. And I guess my counter argument is, it is. Now it's like the same thing with healthcare. We don't want government involved in this. It is. Now, how are we going to shape it in a way that makes it work? And that's what we're trying to do.
And I do think there's so much opportunity to not only for people to realize that, okay, we have more things in common. I mean, the way this issue polls is amazing. But also, law is a teacher, right? So when we start focusing on the fact that, yes, this is the most essential part of human life here, to have that bonding happen. And also the fact that, we're talking about adoption in the midst of this, another thing that pro-life conservatives don't do enough of. And so I think we're really stepping up to the plate in serious, urgent ways by talking about this issue and insisting something happen.
Absolutely. And, the line you said at the beginning there, law as a teacher is so important. And that, we always say that with respect to abortion, that, that the law there is a teacher, and it's a terrible teacher. But when we talk, having the discussion is so important. The fact that, we could be having a discussion hopefully next year, and maybe even in a bipartisan way, at least I hope it is, on this issue. And we highlight all the things, just the discussion that we've had, to have that as a national discussion, and have it as a national discussion without the typical acrimony that you would see in a lot of the issues that we're dealing with. Because while the left wants to do other things in addition to what we're talking about, the left generally agrees with the points that I'm making. I don't think you would find too many people on the left who would listen to the things that I've talked about as to what a parental leave program should be, and take issue with any of the points supporting why we should have this. I think they would agree with, if not all of them, most of them. That's a very strange, it's a very strange thing to happen. And that might, and at least it should, get notoriety, and hopefully we can engage, the media and Hollywood and others, and with a real sort of larger than life effort to focus in on why this is an important part of a healthy America. And again, I don't see anything but benefits from doing so.
Senator, since you were such a critical part of it, does this feel a little bit like welfare reform to you?
Not as much, because I don't think, going back in the day, that the left was at all engaged in that. That party, the Democratic Party of 1990s, doesn't exist today. And so the elements of the Democratic Party that were, open to changing the welfare system and ultimately voted for it, and Bill Clinton, that's just not there anymore. And so when I talk about people agreeing with me, they're agreeing with me, and I'm talking progressives agreeing with me. Not a single progressive wanted welfare reform to happen. I mean, as you recall, when it did pass, a whole raft of them quit in the Clinton administration. So we're talking about the new Democratic Party actually agreeing with this, which is what makes this such an enticing area to talk about.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Santorum. It's always so wonderful to talk to you. I appreciate your time on this critical issue.
My pleasure. And you're going to have the panel ahead of you. I've worked with, with these folks. I mean, you're going to see, boys, Santorum, boy, sounded like you knew what he was talking about. These people really know what they're talking about. So you're in for a treat.
Well, thank you for all the good you do.
Thank you.
And I want to welcome our panel now. We have Abby McCloskey, who is with the AEI-Brookings Bipartisan Working Group on Paid Family Leave. We have Adrienne Schweer from the Bipartisan Policy Council, and Nadine Maenza from Patriot Voices, and Ramesh Ponnuru from the National Review Institute and the American Enterprise Institute. And thank you all for joining us today. I know you're all busy people. Maybe if I can start with you, Adrienne. Just how did you get into this, and any general points about why this is so important, paid family leave?
Yeah, so I think I took a journey a lot like many young parents. I had a really robust paid parental leave program for my first child, which was a great blessing. And then I was working for the federal government with my third, where federal government employees had not a single day of paid parental leave. And I had a very high risk pregnancy, which meant I had to take every sick day and every vacation day to make sure I was going to the doctor twice a week and really caring for that beautiful girl in my belly. And I was left with a total of 2 weeks that I could take. I'm under FMLA, I was qualified for unpaid leave, but I had about 2 weeks of paid leave. And that was about all my family could cover. Someone donated 2. So I had 4 total weeks with that girl. And it enraged me to know how lucky and privileged I am and how hard it was for my family and how different it was to raise baby Georgia compared to the my 2 daughters that I had had before her. And I wanted to change it. So I got involved, and that was when I learned some stark realities that 81% of Americans today don't have a single day of a defined paid leave program. While women are lucky to have access to programs like short-term disability for maternity leave in some cases, few cases, but some cases, most dads don't. And I really saw my husband, who took a whole month off with our first child, blossom into fatherhood, and how it transformed his relationship to our family, to me, and to our child. And the more data you learn about this issue, the more you realize how important it is. And then I'll just say the last thing that has been a deep challenge is that, like Senator Santorum said, Democrats have had a handle on paid family leave as an issue for a very long time, and Republicans were not talking about it. So I really sought out, like Abby and Nadine, to try and build a cadre of Republicans and moderate Democrats that were willing to talk about solutions to paid family leave that could actually get signed into law. And that was what brought me to the Bipartisan Policy Center.
Nadine, how about you?
Well, for us, Patriot Voices, working with Rick Santorum there, we've taken a aggressive approach with working family policy, and we really saw this as a gap. And then with my work with Clapham Group, also again looking at why aren't Republicans involved in this? So we sought it out. We sought out Abby. She briefed us on it. We started working with Maggie Cordish over at the White House at the time, bringing conservatives in to talk with the White House about paid family leave. And I really got to be in the room. I love to tell a story of people saying the word for the first time. It's just something literally we had never discussed as a community, and hearing people that weren't too sure, that it sounded like a lot of government. And then as they went through this intellectual journey and started understanding, as Adrienne had mentioned, all the different benefits and the reasons there are. So I've seen so many people go from, wow, I'm not really sure, to writing op-eds, being advocates. There is so much upside, so little downside, no downside, that we're just seeing as we continue to have conversations about paid leave, more and more people are understanding that this is a conservative issue that we should own. And if we care about families, if we care about babies, if we care about community, if we care about the budget, if we care about the health, you go through each of these points, and paid family leave is a piece of that. And so it's been really encouraging to see so many people come alongside us, and now, have these robust plans coming out of Congress that are really unique and interesting. And we keep having these conversations, and that's how we're going to find the solutions that work for our communities.
Rick Santorum was really telling the truth when he said, these are the people. Abby, you are a big part of that. Yeah. How did you first get into all of this?
Well, thank you so much, Kathryn. And it's really exciting to see everybody here and talking about this. And admittedly, I stumbled into the issue not looking for it, but now I've been studying it for the better part of a decade. I was researching economic opportunity and what holds women back in particular, and looking at childhood development, and that basket of issues led me inadvertently to paid leave. And then looking at the reams of research we now have from state-based paid leave programs, like in California and certainly internationally, that show how much of a benefit paid parental leave can be, starting with, as the Senator mentioned, and Kathryn, you mentioned too, starting with infants and an extension of the pro-life argument in an area that we tend to underinvest in anyways. And then growing out into labor force attachment for women, and job security, and reduced reliance on other types of benefits like welfare. And then growing out from there about how it turns into a pro-growth policy and strengthens our social fabric together. So it started from a seed that has now grown into a tree, and I've seen how many different areas that paid parental leave policy can affect, and how squarely it fits into conservatives' wheelhouse for being pro-life and pro-growth and pro-work and pro-family, and that the way the policy is structured I am convinced can be done in a way that has minimal disruption to business, minimal cost to our bottom line, and yet delivers a hugely important benefit when you're looking at economic opportunity and the health of our children and families.
Ramesh Ponnuru, you've been writing about family policy for almost as long as I've known you, which is about 25 years. So this is something that you've been talking about for a while. What was it that made you first write about it?
Well, I was certainly aware of the problem that many families have when they have a newborn and have to start juggling work and family. When my wife and I had our first child, I was working for a company that shall go unnamed, where nobody had young children. Nobody had a child in quite a while, and there was no paid leave policy. And while I was in many ways in a very fortunate position, it did create some challenges. As you were mentioning, I've been working on some aspects of pro-family economics and public policy for some time. It really wasn't until, though, I came across the work of the Independent Women's Forum and Kristen Shapiro and their proposal for a paid family leave, that I saw how you could integrate this into a free market, conservative, limited government perspective in a way that just gave families more flexibility. And having seen what I thought was a pretty good idea, I'd seen a bunch of criticisms of it that didn't make sense. I became, I guess, something of an evangelist for it.
We're going to pause the panel for a moment and bring in a video that Iowa Senator Joni Ernst sent for this panel. She was sorry she couldn't be a live participant.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening in. I know there's a lot happening this week at the Republican National Convention, and I'm thankful to be able to share some thoughts with you. Like you, I think it's important that we as conservatives work together to ensure our babies and children have a bright future. Supporting working families is a top priority of mine, and showing our support for our hardworking moms and dads during this pandemic is more important than ever. Right now, in these unprecedented times, our families are working hard to manage during this crisis. I'm sure many of you have faced your own challenges dealing with work and home life. Children are taking on new educational environments, from virtual schooling to homeschool to longer hours at childcare. In Iowa, we have a childcare crisis that began before the pandemic and is growing. I'm thankful for the leadership of Governor Kim Reynolds on tackling this crisis head on. I got engaged in the issue after hearing from so many parents how it was nearly impossible to access care in our rural areas. Prior to the pandemic, the United States had record low unemployment and tremendous economic gains under the leadership of President Trump. As we continue to reopen America, we must do it sensibly and responsibly to ensure that we tackle this virus with warp speed. And we must work together to support economic policies that help, rather than hurt, working families, from tax relief to time off for new parents. Unfortunately, the liberal left solution for American families has all too often been a big government takeover. Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, and other socialist aims. These so-called solutions are expensive, bureaucratic, and bad for working moms and dads. On the paid leave front, Senator Mike Lee and I have been working together on a conservative, budget-neutral, paid parental leave plan that is friendly to taxpayers. Recognizing that 99% of the businesses in Iowa are small businesses, I wanted a paid parental leave plan that could work for them too. I look forward to continuing to find consensus and a path forward on paid leave. I couldn't be prouder to be working with my colleagues in the Senate and President Trump in the White House to get things done for Americans, from supporting life to expanding childcare access to policies that support jobs and will help us rebound from this pandemic stronger than ever. Thank you.
I want to give a special shout out to Miranda Melvin, who made that work. She's behind the scenes from the National Review Institute, and she put this all together. So grateful to her and the Clapham group for making this happen, in addition to all of your time. Adrienne, if I can start with you. So some of the proposals, there are a bunch of different proposals out there from Democrats and Republicans. And what's best? What should conservatives be supporting?
So I think the coolest thing for me is that 5 years ago there were no Republican proposals, and Senator Deb Fischer of Nebraska really spearheaded a tax incentive that created the first national program. It's a pilot, got it into 2017 tax reform. President Trump was the first president to have a paid family leave policy platform and carry it forward into his administration. We have seen the Republican Senate and White House work closely with House Democrats to pass 12 weeks paid parental leave for moms and dads and all federal government workers, my original passion. And all those things have happened in the last 5 years, in addition to Senator Ernst, Senator Lee, Senator Rubio, Senator Fischer, and many others coming up with new creative ideas and proposals for paid family leave. And I think there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons to all the different ideas out there. There's not one that's perfectly built. There probably never will be. But I think the really exciting thing about all the Republican proposals right now are that they benefit both moms and dads. And I think that is a transformative and really good conservative principle for everyone to understand. There is a physiological need for moms to recover, but there is a very important societal and developmental need for dads to be part of those first few days of a child's life. Nadine tells this story best, so I'm gonna steal it from her, but there's a researcher who studies infant development, who studies human connection. And when a mom gives birth to her child, she releases a chemical, a love potion that makes her fall in love with that baby. And it's now proven that dads release that too. When they are present for the birth, they physically release that hormone and they fall in love with their partner, with their wife, and with their child. And we need that at the beginning of life, and for that dad to be involved in those first couple of days. Paternal involvement in infants and in children has monumental effects on that child's long-term outcomes, their developmental outcomes, their emotional and health outcomes. And I really love that about all the proposals, including Senator Ernst and Senator Lee's. And the last thing I'll say about that is we should be so excited that true conservatives like Senator Lee and Senator Ernst are coming up with creative ideas, throwing them out, even though they know that there's going to be quite a backlash from the left and even from some Republicans, and taking a stand on this issue. So they're not a perfect answer to you. I'm sure Abby, Nadine, and Ramesh will have better ones, but.
That was great, Nadine.
I was going to say, I tell that story a lot, but I actually heard the story from an expert at an event you put on. So it's all interrelated, and talking about the fathers, just to add on that is, studies show that when they're involved, if they're home with paid leave, they're more involved in child rearing. And if they're involved in, another study says if they're involved in child rearing, then they're also, child's outcomes are better. So there's just, so many different reasons that this is a no-lose situation for moms and dads both, not just mothers. But obviously, the other part of it too is I think the health of the baby is studies have shown that there's a 10% less neonatal mortality if mother is home with their child. So, we can go through one after another, but there's so many different reasons that society benefits. And I think that Joni Ernst made a good point that these budget neutral plans, we're talking about all the benefits to society at a budget neutral. So it's a net win for communities and for families for us to have paid leave.
Abby, you must be similarly excited to see all these proposals out there.
Yeah, it's incredible to see the momentum and what's changed in such a short time. And some of that credit is due to the Trump administration and Ivanka Trump in particular, helping to lead Republicans along into this conversation. And as Republicans, we celebrate competition and having more ideas for how to circle the paid leave square from different Republican contingents, from bipartisan contingents, and certainly from the left also, I think are really helpful in getting us to a point where we can have an impactful policy. To me, the issue is so incredibly important that I would like to see a policy design that can generate bipartisan support on both sides of the aisle. that can outlast a Republican administration or a Democrat administration, instead of the volleying of policies that we've seen through the Obama administration and Trump administration, and who knows what comes next. And so the nature of the policy being able to generate significant support on both sides of the aisle, as is the case for how the issue polls, which has significant support from both Democrats and Republicans and independents, is an important principle to me in thinking through what type of policy approach is best, as is an approach that disproportionately affects our most vulnerable workers, that has the gender equity that Adrienne mentioned from Mothers and Fathers, and then also has a significant pro-growth, pro-work component, meaning that in the end it's economically beneficial in addition to the other benefits that such a policy would bring.
Ramesh, do you have a favorite plan, and does a conservative approach survive if Ivanka Trump isn't around, next year?
So I think there are questions of ideal policy design that are important. But if I look at, say, the Senator Lee and Ernst proposal on the one hand, and the Senator Rubio, Senator Romney, Congresswoman Wagner, Crenshaw proposal, I don't know that the differences are so huge that we should get really hung up on them. And one might easily say just, sort of whatever gets the most support and can be passed makes sense. I do think it's going to be a pretty politically delicate operation, because it remains the case that there are a lot of conservative Republicans who just don't want to get involved in this at all. And so you certainly can't have something that any Republicans are going to like unless you also have Democrats on board. You might not be able to get a purely Democratic proposal through either. And so when Abby says we need bipartisanship for sustainability, I think that's right. And I think it's probably true that we need it for viability. Getting back to the question of sort of design of it, we've talked on this panel, and other advocates talk about a lot of different goals and goods that paid leave would achieve, whether it is increasing labor force participation and attachment, or mother-child bonding, or family formation. Well, the thing is, these are all goods, but they are in some tension with one another. And the policy that is ideally optimized for one of them isn't going to be for the others. It seems to me that the way we should approach this is in terms of providing flexibility for families so that they can make their own work-family choices as they see fit, as they see best for their family. And so we should be as unprescriptive as possible. And that's why, if I had to choose, I would go for more of the Romney-Rubio kind of approach.
Kathryn, can I add one other thing that I think circles some of this out? All the Republican proposals that have made their way into the world were pre-COVID, and COVID has changed everything. And I think it will be in place and continue to change everything for at least another year, despite my desire for it to go away. And one of the first acts of Congress in the beginning of this pandemic was to pass Families First, which had a pretty big paid leave component. And it was led by the Democrats. And it is now passed into law. It lives for the rest of this year. And it provides 10 days of paid sick leave for people who get coronavirus or have someone who they need to care for that has coronavirus to build that 14-day quarantine. But it also provides paid family leave for families who have children out of school or out of childcare. What's missing from that legislation? Well, many things in that program, but one of them is that it doesn't cover parental leave. In those negotiations, there weren't enough Republicans and or people thinking about how hard it was going to be for new parents to bring a baby home in this world, and it was left out. Also, elder care was left out, and there are a lot of people who have loved ones in elder care facilities that are bringing them home and taking care of them. And part of Republican principles are the family. What Senator Santorum said, we are about the family. We are about multi-generational families taking care of each other, of that personal responsibility, And I think it has elevated for me questions across the spectrum on what these policies can and should do to help support that family unit. And much like Ramesh, I think that we need individualism, we need choice, we need flexibility in these programs. But COVID has changed a lot of this. And I, just today, talking to two moms very recently who are gonna go into the hospital and have new babies in the next couple months. And thank goodness their husbands will likely be able to be there. But before COVID, 1 in 4 women went to work between 10 and 14 days of giving birth. They are not physically recovered. They are barely breastfeeding. They are not sleeping. They should not be on the job. And they were likely going into very unsafe childcare situations then when we weren't in a global pandemic. And I just would ask us in a COVID world, why was parental leave left out of this policy? And why are we not pushing to fix that at a minimum in this COVID pandemic package to make sure that new parents have that same 10 weeks of paid leave that I do when my child's school is closed?
Nadine, COVID really does change a lot of things and underscores the urgency of paid family leave, doesn't it?
It does. And, we at Patriot Voices immediately jumped on advocating for packages to protect families during this time. This is, unprecedented times. And we were disappointed when a lot of the pork got put in because that wasn't the point of these packages. And so I think in the fight with all the pork, a lot of the important things for families got pushed aside, as Adrienne mentioned, particularly parental leave. But we do believe this has been an important time to have some safeguards, especially I know Rubio with the PPP, for businesses to continue their payrolls. And so, but we're missing that parental component right now. And of course, with families not being able to travel, and a lot of times your parents would come and help you with a baby, and now that's not available. So we're in this situation where we have people isolated with new children without being able to get the support they used to be able to have, and we're concerned about that. So I hope that future plans will consider parental leave as part of that for sure.
Abby, how does coronavirus change things or just add to the urgency of this?
Yeah, well, it certainly exposed our need for better paid leave policies in general, but also specific to the crisis, that we had less than half of low-wage workers had any type of sick leave, which is particularly problematic in a contagion environment. And we know that very few families, especially low-income families, have paid family leave, which is particularly a problem when you have only 1 in 7 kids returning to school this fall in a normal schedule and childcare closures. I do believe that the needs for paid leave that are in relation to COVID are slightly different than the type of long-term paid leave policies we need in place. I tend to think that long-term, there's some baseline level of paid leave. I think that starts with parental leave, and that we scale up and down during crises or as circumstances change. So paid leave for school closures and childcare closures is unique to this crisis. I think the lack of paid sick leave was exposed and unique to this crisis and is something that companies should take on themselves to provide. And yet we still have, and certainly, I think that the biggest problem with the current COVID paid leave provisions is that it's related to company size. And the reality is that any person at any company or wage or occupation who gets sick or whose child cannot go to school should have access to paid leave. This is something that is necessary to stymie the spread of the virus and to preserve, to the extent that we can, and shore up our labor market. But COVID will, God willing, eventually pass. And when it does, there needs to be a separate conversation about what type of long-term paid leave plans do we want in place that, again, that are sustainable, that don't result in significant business interruption, but that fill these critical holes in our safety net. And to me, after looking at the research for the last 5 or 10 years, I do remain convinced that the place to start for that is paid parental leave and investing in parents and infants.
I couldn't agree with Abby more that COVID leave is specific, temporary, and how it's designed should be very different than long-term paid leave, like the Cradle Act, Senator Ernst's proposal. Like they are defined and different. But one similarity that strikes me is Republican-led paid leave that Senator Fisher put into the 2017 tax reform bill was designed to reach low-income people. It had a cap on who could receive it. And COVID leave put the cap on business size. So if you work at a company with 500 or less employees, you qualify. And I personally think that we should extend it to all companies of all sizes, specifically for COVID, for the short-term program, and make it more dependent and more focused on the people who need it the most, because our high wage earners are going to have paid sick leave, they're going to have savings, they're going to have opportunities to cover quarantine time or covering childcare. But most of our workers, especially those on the front line who don't qualify right now, should qualify.
Ramesh, any comments on coronavirus? And one ththing I wanted—
I'm against it.
That is the right position. I'm sure it's poll tested. I mean, one of the things, besides the specific policies, this period of time has focused us on family in new kind of ways. And your heart really goes out to the people who are not, you hear a lot of people talking about, the luxury of having time with your children. There are a lot of families who don't have that luxury of having time with their children. The grocery store workers who have wound up being frontline workers and all of this. But I feel like we can't let that moment go and not miss the lessons for policy, right? From here. But one other thing I wanted to ask you, Ramesh, and we'll get other people's comments too. This has been touched on. The senator was talking about this. So a lot of the Democratic proposals do include caregivers and elderly situations. And I mean, honestly, how did all those people die in New York, in nursing homes? Because we have a cultural problem, about how we care for our elderly. How do you balance that reality with, trying to keep one of these, whatever proposal winds up seeing the light of day, from including everything?
Yeah, so that is the trade-off, right? I mean, there are a lot of potential needs here, but there's an argument for prioritization as well. And my inclination would be to start with new parents and that parent-child bond. Not that I'm against doing other things as well, but I wouldn't sort of want to come in with something that's too huge to say, be digested by Congress. On the particular question about COVID that you asked, I would just say there's a whole broad range of family-related issues, and I don't want to take us too far afield, but I do think that it is the number one place where we're going to see big changes, or could see big changes, and we ought to be rethinking things, is education. I mean, that's really, for a lot of families, including my own, something that has been very starkly exposed during this crisis. And in general, I would just say that there's, because of this broad range of distinctive family problems that COVID has created, and because of the fact that, at least I believe that families are overtaxed, I think that the immediate thing that we ought to be doing is just providing families more financial support via tax relief. And so I think, as much as I think that the Democratic House COVID relief bill, the HEROES Act, is mostly just full of Democratic wish list items that I'm not for, they're right to want to expand the child credit as part of our response.
I'm looking at the chat here, and there are a bunch of questions that people are asking. So anybody who wants to pop up and answer, feel free to see if that works. Do these proposals put the burden of paying the mothers and fathers when on paid leave fall on the government, federal or local, or their employers? I think there's some basic questions still people have. What are we talking about in a conservative proposal?
Can I just in real quick and just kind of do a brief of the GOP plans so people get a sense of what they are? There's two plans, one that Marco Rubio has been leading. He's introduced two different Congresses, and Michael Lee and Joni Ernst as well. And they're similar in that you're able to withdraw Social Security earnings for 1, 2, or 3 months of leave, and then you just retire later to pay it back. There's more rules of how you can share it and income levels and things like that, but that's the gist. So you're basically using Social Security and then just paying it back by retiring later. And then there would be the Cassidy Cinema bill, which is the first bipartisan one that would be using the child tax credit system. So how that would work is after the birth or adoption of a baby, you'd withdraw $5,000, and then you'd pay that back by, instead of taking $2,000 with writing it off your taxes for the child tax credit for that particular child, you would write off $1,500 for 10 years. So you basically pay it back over the course of 10 years. And there are some changes for lower income individuals as well for that plan. So both plans pay themselves off, don't require any mandate from the employer, don't come at any cost to the employer. There's no job protection, so there are other things, you know, that can be talked about in future bills, but those kind of give you the gist that might help some of our listeners understand a little bit more when we're talking about a budget neutral plan of the ones that currently are on the table on the Republican side.
Does anybody
So, sure. I would just say, you know, there's also been some discussion with the idea of taking some of your future Social Security benefits early for this purpose. Maybe you could just pay it back before you retire, or maybe you could take a slightly lower Social Security level instead of retiring later. These things vary in their administrative feasibility, but they're all certainly ideas that are part of this debate. One thing I want to say, one thing that people bring up, I wouldn't say that there's no cost to the employer, right? Because if you have made family leave more available to people, more easy to finance, then more of them are going to take it. And so that disruption cost is there. And I think that is something that, you know, you just have to say, are you willing to do that? And my answer would be yes. I think it is a more moderate cost than if the employers were also actually asked to finance it. And it's a cost that you know, is in the interests of strong families, which is a public good. But you know, there are a lot of trade-offs, and some of them aren't obvious until you study them.
And Kathryn, to the question of, you know, who bears the cost for these types of policies, I think we have to ask ourselves more broadly, are there benefits to society as a whole from a healthy incoming generation of people? And we make a lot of investments as a country in education primarily that says the health and well-being of the next generation has benefits that go beyond that person and their family, and that spill over to make us a better place to live and that demonstrate the values we believe. And I do think that paid parental leave, the research is so overwhelming in terms of the health benefits to that baby and their parent, the workplace benefits, the reduced reliance on government benefits like food stamps, that those benefits go well beyond the family itself and become, by the way, negative consequences if those families don't have access to paid leave that also spill out on all of us. And so to us, I think of it as I think of education or any number of other public goods, that when the benefits go beyond the person themselves, and that provides a basis for the funding going beyond that person themselves, which to me is the rub a bit of Senator Ernst's plan or Rubio's plan and all the others who have co-sponsored with them, is that the pay for specifically on that parent. And the pay for specifically on probably that vulnerable parent who doesn't have access to paid leave from their employer, and that's why they're taking their Social Security early. And I think because the size of the program, no matter how it's funded, is relatively a small one, it's worth opening up the conversation to say, is that something that all of us as a country should contribute to, instead of that burden just being on the individual themselves?
We have 5 minutes left, so I want to go through to everybody for final thoughts about how we move forward on this issue. Adrienne, start us off.
I think that we need principled conservatives, regular people, workers, employers, talking to their legislators about this issue and trying to showcase how important it is, helping them understand that it's not just that the polling they're seeing is saying it's a good thing, but their constituents are saying it's a good thing. I think COVID has really helped workers understand what they do and don't have from a benefits perspective and how few are covered by paid leave. And my hope is that they'll let their legislators and their employers know, and we'll start to see more coverage. But really, we need bipartisan policymaking. There are not very many policy proposals that have bipartisan collaboration. And I think to the credit of all the Republicans that have put proposals forward, they have been trying to work across the aisle. And I hope that their Democratic counterparts will come to the table too, and that there will be space for new ideas, because I'm pretty confident that we don't have the one idea that's going to get signed into law shaped up yet. And we need more creativity. We need to learn from COVID. We have a big program right now, and we need to learn from it and understand what was right and what was wrong and who it reached and who it didn't. We need to do the same for the pilot that went in 2017 tax reform, and really learn how that's worked and how it hasn't.
Nadine?
Yes, I wanted to mention that we have a website with several conservative groups, including Students for Life, Independent Women's Forum, Priests for Life, American Principle Project, and 60 Plus that have all gone together for a website called paidleaveforfamilies.com. And what you can find on paidleaveforfamilies.com is fact sheets. All the facts that we've been saying are on a fact sheet that have the footnote to the original source where that came from, the Institute of Health or Pew research or whatever. They're all documented. It's a great place to go to start that journey, so you can try to understand the stories and the facts on each of the things we have talked about are all pretty well documented. We're going to be adding a legislative briefing book soon to this that will even go deeper, and something that you could take to your member of Congress. But this is just a one way that people can kind of do a deep dive and really understand, like we've been talking about, how important it is. The one thing I know that didn't come up that I think is important is keeping parents off public assistance. There's so many ways that it affects the budget in a positive way, as we talked about, by raising the birth rate, where our birth rates are plummeting. So we talk about raising it from right now, it's at 1.71 per woman, and for a replacement would be 2.1. But when you poll women, most women want 2.7. So in order to, meet the threshold, which I learned from Adrienne, meet the threshold of what families want, that's more future taxpayers. So between keeping people off public assistance, I think 39% of people that take paid leave are less likely to go on public assistance. So there's so many different facts like that, and they're all on this website, and you can take a look at the research yourself and come to your own conclusion, and continue to have these conversations. We talked about a broader leave. Parental leave really should be this priority, but these are the things we need conversations. We need for people to argue about it. We need people to look at all these different plans. We're not afraid of people having a different opinion, because that helps us figure out what fits our community, but we need to be done with letting the left decide what fits our community. We need to decide for ourselves as conservatives what this plan should look like, how it can take care of families, and how we can come, as Abby says, to a bipartisan agreement on a plan that won't be a political football, because we can't play like politics with families' lives. We need something that will be long-term. Maybe we can change it, but that will make it really help families where they are right now.
Wow, substantive debate on policy issues. That sounds like a novel idea.
Thank you, Kathryn, for leading so many of those.
Abby, your final thoughts?
Yeah, there is no question we're in an era of spending exhaustion. I mean, you wouldn't know it looking at the DNC, but we were in a bad debt to GDP ratio before coronavirus. It's worse now. And this tends to be of particular concern to conservatives and to fiscal hawks. And to our present situation, I would say, let's not be penny wise and pound foolish, that the types of paid parental leave programs we're talking about are probably less than half of 1% of what we spend on older Americans and in entitlements like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. And so we're talking about a modest program that would fill a critical gap in the safety net to strengthen families, to extend our pro-life stance, and have significant economic benefits across, I think, a broad population beyond the family themselves. And so to me, while I share the exhaustion in our uncontrolled spending and lack of pay-fors, that is not a reason to stop what has become bipartisan momentum on paid parental leave, which in the scope of things is a relatively small plan that delivers outsized benefits.
Ramesh?
Thank you for letting me be the token guy on this panel. I think the smart bet is that nothing good is going to come out of Congress on this issue, because that's always the smart bet on any issue. If something happens, though, I think it'll be because a significant number of Democrats who prefer a more tax-heavy, prescriptive, inflexible, one-size-fits-all program realize that they have a real risk of getting nothing for a long time if they don't compromise, and a significant number of Republicans who think that nothing should be done on this issue realize there's a significant risk that they get that inflexible, prescriptive, heavy tax policy if they don't do anything. That is, I think, the narrow way through for something constructive. And while I think, the odds are against it for a lot of reasons, it is worth the fighting for.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you, Senator Santorum, who says he's going to be watching this later. And thank you, everyone who's watching. I want to invite everybody to the National Review Institute's 7th Annual William F. Buckley Jr. Prize Dinner Gala at Home on October 5th. We're honoring Bill's brother, the former senator and judge James Buckley, and the philanthropist Virginia James. And I think it'll be an uplifting night. So I encourage you all to take a look at National Review Institute's website for more information. And Bill Buckley, of course, founded National Review Magazine and the National Review Institute, and we're able to have conversations with great partners like the Clapham Group because of it. So thank you again, and I hope to talk to each one of you again, and those watching as well. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Chicken or steak at the dinner?
Whatever you want.
Flexibility.
You mean a bowl of cereal then? Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.